In 1477, a high-ranking official held a lit taper deep within the Imperial Archives of Nanjing. Outside, the Ming Dynasty turned its back on the world. He lowered the flickering flame not to a candle but to a priceless logbook. Crisp paper curled, blackened. 30 years of history turned to ash. This wasn't vandalism, it was an official order. Why would an empire deliberately erase its greatest achievement? What terrifying truth did those burned records conceal? And why does another legendary journey, centuries earlier, celebrated in myth, hide a horror we still refuse to see? The hidden truth might change what you believe about every story you've ever heard. What does it say about you that you've been told one version of history, but the real story is far darker? To understand what was lost and what was saved, you need to picture two worlds at once. First, you are in the South China Sea in the year 1405. The water is crowded with the largest armada ever assembled. Over 300 ships, some of them colossal treasure ships, measuring up to 400 feet long, dwarf anything Europe could produce for centuries to come. On board are nearly 28,000 men, sailors, soldiers, doctors, and diplomats. At their head is Admiral Zheng He, a towering, formidable eunuch, a brilliant mariner and warrior trusted by the Yongle Emperor to project Ming power across the Indian Ocean. His mission is not conquest, but to establish a Chinese world order through diplomacy and trade. Now, travel backward more than 2,000 years. You are on a single battered ship in the wine-dark Aegean Sea, the wood groaning under the strain of a relentless storm. The crew is a handful of starving, terrified men. Their leader is Odysseus, the clever king of Ithaca, trying to get home after a brutal 10-year war at Troy. His journey will also take 10 years. He has no maps, no imperial mandate. He is guided only by his wits and pursued by the wrath of a god. One of these journeys is a historical fact, a display of systemic power so advanced it defies belief. The other is a foundational myth, a story of one man's agonizing struggle against a hostile universe. Both men would change the world, and both of their stories end in an act of profound and terrible destruction. But what you're about to discover is that the reasons for that destruction are far more unsettling than you've been led to believe. And this is where the story stops making sense. For 30 years, Zheng He's treasure fleet was the master of the seas. From 1405 to 1433, he completed 7 epic voyages. Imagine what you would have seen. His ships docking in Calicut, India, unloading silks and porcelain. Their decks crowded with merchants speaking a dozen languages. You would have witnessed Zheng He's soldiers storming the pirate stronghold of Palembang, ending a reign of terror in the Strait of Malacca. You would have watched him in the royal courts of Arabia and East Africa, negotiating trade deals and collecting tribute, not with threats, but with the overwhelming spectacle of Chinese wealth and power. He brought back ambassadors from over 30 different kingdoms. He presented a giraffe to a stunned imperial court in Beijing, a creature they believed to be a mythical qilin, a sign of heavenly favor. All of this was done under the command of the ambitious Yongle Emperor, a man who looked outward, who wanted China to be the undisputed center of the world. But the emperor was not immortal. He died in 1424. And with him died the political will for such grand ambition. His son, the Hongxi Emperor, listened to a different set of advisors, the conservative Confucian scholar officials. They had always watched the voyages with suspicion. They saw the expeditions as a ruinous expense, a dangerous dalliance with foreign cultures, and a threat to their own power, which was rooted in land and agriculture, not in commerce and the sea. You can almost hear the whispers in the corridors of the Forbidden City, the memos being drafted, the arguments made behind closed doors. The scholars argued for stability, for tradition, for an inward-looking purity. They began their work immediately. The new emperor ordered the voyages stopped. The shipyards were dismantled. The grandest vessels were left to rot in their moorings. The political climate in Beijing grew cold and gray, hostile to the very idea of exploration. Zheng He was allowed one final voyage under the Xuande Emperor in 1431, a final fading echo of a glorious era. But what they did not know yet was the reason for this sudden shift. When he returned, the door to the world was not just closed, it was being locked and barricaded from the inside. Meanwhile, in another timeline, another story, Odysseus was facing his own relentless pressure. His journey was a methodical dismantling of a man. Watch him drive a sharpened, burning stake into the single eye of the Cyclops Polyphemus. An act of such savage survival it echoes for eternity. See him tied to the mast of his own ship, his body straining against the ropes, forcing himself to listen to the siren's song, a sound so beautiful it drives men to their deaths. He deliberately exposes himself to a fatal, maddening truth just to know it. He sails to the edge of the world and descends into the darkness of the underworld itself to consult the ghost of the prophet Tiresias, the air smelling of decay and regret. He loses his men, group by group, to forces beyond his control. 6 of them are snatched from the deck by the monster Scylla, their legs and arms dangling as they are lifted into the air, crying his name. The rest are drowned in a divine storm after they foolishly slaughter the sacred cattle of the sun god Helios. Each loss is a specific failure, a weight he carries alone. One man's world was being erased by the quiet, deliberate strokes of a bureaucrat's pen. The other's was being torn apart by the hands of vengeful gods and his own tragic decisions. But the story of a journey isn't just about the voyage. It's about the return. And for both men, the homecoming would be the most violent part of the story, but not for the reasons you might expect. But there's a detail buried in the record that nobody flagged at the time. Think about the person you trust most in the world. Now imagine them not just disagreeing with you, but actively working to erase the evidence of your life's greatest work. For Zheng He, this betrayal came not from one person, but from an entire institution he had served faithfully. The Confucian scholar bureaucracy saw his legacy as a cancer. The final emotional blow came after his death. Around 1477, a powerful court eunuch proposed a new expedition, an echo of Zheng He's grand voyages. To plan it, he requested the official logs and charts from the Imperial Archives. The vice president of the Ministry of War, a man named Liu Daxia, met the request with silence. He claimed the documents were lost, but the historical record strongly suggests he didn't lose them. He destroyed them. He made a conscious decision that it was better for China to forget its own greatness than to be tempted by it again. This was not the act of a villain cackling in the shadows. This was the act of a true believer, a man so committed to his vision of a pure, agrarian, inward-looking China that he was willing to burn the map to a different future. It was a quiet, bureaucratic, and utterly profound act of betrayal. A civilization was turning its back on its own hero. For Odysseus, the betrayal was more intimate, more personal. After 20 years, he finally sets foot on the shores of his home, Ithaca. But he is disguised by the goddess Athena as a wretched old beggar, his skin wrinkled, his clothes in tatters. He walks into his own great hall and is met with contempt. Arrogant young suitors who have overrun his palace and are trying to force his wife Penelope to marry one of them, mock him and throw a stool at his head. His own servants, who grew up in his household, fail to recognize him or, worse, have sided with the usurpers. He is a king rendered invisible, a ghost in his own life. Then comes the moment that breaks him. Lying on a dung heap near the gates, old and neglected, is his dog Argos. He had raised the dog as a puppy before he left for Troy. 20 years have passed. As Odysseus approaches, the dog recognizes him. He cannot stand, but he lifts his head and wags his tail. Odysseus sees this, and he has to turn away to hide a tear, the first tear he has shed in the entire epic. Argos has performed his final duty of loyalty. He lowers his head and dies. He has crossed the known world, fought gods and monsters, lost every friend he ever had, all to come home and find he is a stranger in his own house. And the only creature who remembers his face is a dying dog. At that moment, the warrior king knows he is completely and utterly alone. And what you're about to learn is that this isn't just a story of individual suffering, but a chilling blueprint for how power operates. Here's where it gets worse. The destruction of Zheng He's records was not a single, isolated event. And here is what should make you deeply uncomfortable. This was not chaos. It was a coordinated system. You need to understand the terrifying efficiency of this purge. First, the scholar officials starved the program of its funding. Then, they issued imperial edicts that made it illegal to build ships with more than 2 masts, a law specifically designed to make long-range voyages impossible. The punishment for violating this law was death. They systematically dismantled the shipyards, letting the advanced knowledge of naval architecture wither and die. Finally, they went for the memory itself. They destroyed the official logs, the star charts, the maps that detailed the routes from Nanjing to the coast of Africa. It was a multi-pronged, bureaucratic blueprint for how to make a giant leap forward. Disappear. The goal was not just to stop future voyages. The goal was to make it seem as if they had never been that important in the first place. To rewrite history into a cautionary tale about the folly of ambition. This wasn't an accident or a lost file. It was a policy. It was a deep, systemic, and chillingly successful campaign to amputate a part of their own history. But one detail survived the purge. A single stone tablet erected by Zheng He himself before his final voyage. And what was written on it changes the entire story, revealing the true, terrifying reason why his voyages were stopped. That stone tablet and others like it reveal the truth of Zheng He's mission in his own words. They were placed in temples in places like Sri Lanka and China's Fujian province. They record the voyages not as acts of conquest, but as a mission to unify the seas and bring the world into a harmonious cosmic order with the Chinese emperor, the Son of Heaven, at its center. Zheng He saw himself as an agent of civilization, bringing peace and stability to the barbarian lands. The systemic truth is this: the voyages were stopped precisely because they were so successful at creating this new world order. They represented an outward-looking, cosmopolitan and commercial China. This was a direct existential threat to the entire power base of the Confucian scholar officials, whose authority was derived from land, agriculture, and a rigid social hierarchy. This was a war for the soul of an empire, fought not with swords but with ink and fire. The bureaucrats won. What you now understand, and what most people never will, is that the real tragedy isn't that a hero was erased. It's that a civilization chose to sever its own connection to the future. This pattern of institutional self-sabotage, of choosing the safety of the known over the promise of the unknown, did not end in 15th century China. You see it today, every time a corporation buries a world-changing discovery because it threatens an existing product. Every time an institution silences a truth that contradicts its dogma, they are holding that same taper. It is the same fundamental choice: protect the comfortable present, or risk the terrifying future. And Odysseus? His story is the foundation for a different kind of system. It is the West's archetypal myth about the individual versus a hostile world. The system he fights is fate, the gods, the chaos of nature. But look at how he wins. When he finally reveals himself in his hall, he does not offer mercy. He offers retribution. He, his son, and 2 loyal servants lock the doors. They then proceed to slaughter every single one of the 108 suitors. The great hall, which had moments before been filled with feasting and music, runs with blood, the floor littered with the dead and dying. The poet Homer describes Odysseus as a lion spattered with gore. But his vengeance is not finished. He then calls for the 12 servant girls who had been disloyal, who had slept with the suitors. He does not kill them quickly. He forces them to clean the blood and gore from the hall, to drag out the bodies of their dead lovers. And then, he takes them outside and hangs them all from a single ship's cable, their feet twitching in the air. The story you have been told is an adventure. The truth is, it's a brutal instruction manual. The systemic truth it encodes into our culture is that to reclaim your home, your identity, your world, you must be willing to become a monster. It is a myth that justifies righteous, absolute violence as the necessary price of order. And that is a pattern you can see playing out in the pages of Western history over and over again. So we return to the question that has been sitting with you this entire video. Why would a man burn the records of his country's greatest glory? The answer you've been waiting for is not malice, it is fear. The scholar officials feared the world Zheng He had opened up. A world of merchants, not farmers. A world of foreign ideas, not Confucian purity. A world of naval power, not land-based authority. A world they could not control. His maps were not just routes to other countries. They were routes to a different kind of China, a future that terrified them. You don't burn the books because they are wrong. You burn them because they are dangerous. You burn them because they prove that another way of life, another way of thinking, is possible. Erasing. Zheng He wasn't about him at all. It was an act of existential self-preservation for their entire worldview. They chose a smaller, safer, more controllable past over a larger, more glorious and terrifyingly uncertain future. The official in the archive holding the flame to the page, he wasn't just burning a logbook. He was burning a map to a future that his civilization would now never have. For the next 400 years, China would look inward, while a handful of small European ships, tiny in comparison to Zheng He's fleet, began to venture out and piece by piece claim the world he had once commanded. That choice to burn the map is not a relic of the past. Every time a corporation buries a world-changing discovery because it threatens an existing product, every time an institution silences a truth that contradicts its dogma, they are holding that same taper. It is the same fundamental choice: protect the comfortable present or risk the terrifying future. And Odysseus' story is a mirror. Asks you what you would be willing to do to get your life back. How much of your own soul you would trade for survival. The heroes we choose to celebrate define us. Tell me in the comments, which is more terrifying? The hero who is erased or the one we choose to remember?